everyone. My name is Bonnie. Welcome. This is a really great panel that you're about to see, so I'm excited for you and myself. This is Art is gonna. So Art Chu is gonna lead the panel discussion. Art Chu is co-founder and managing partner of Stadia Ventures. Stadia invests in, mentors, and manages sports tech startups while also acting as an innovation partner for major sports brands, teams, and organizations. And I will let you go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Working? Is that all right? Sounds good. All right. So yeah, so we're gonna. It's very informal. You know, we'll go through the panel. We'll have lots of time for Q&A and afterwards. As said, my name is Art Chu. I'm with Stadia Ventures. Just to give a little idea on additional background. So I started on the golf industry, working for companies like Titleist and Golf Digest. Had a golf startup that crashed and burned. Learned a lot of entrepreneurial lessons on what not to do. Failing pretty quickly. Then came to St. Louis working for Rawlings Sporting Goods, and after Rawlings ended up starting Stadia Ventures and a company called Rapsodo, which still exists in the St. Louis community, which is doing mostly analytics and ball tracking, computer vision ball tracking for baseball, softball, and golf. And I will introduce, I'll let them go into more details on them, but first is Matt Gardner. So Matt is Vice President, Innovation and Technology for our nice hometown St. Louis Blues. Welcome, Matt. Bill Powell. Bill is co-founder, managing partner of Anthropy Partners. Thank you, Bill. And Stephen Tungett. Stephen on the end. Stephen is the COO of Axioforce and has also been a member of several different startups within the St. Louis community. So we'll have some excellent input. So you have input from an entrepreneur, from an investor, and from an industry perspective. And maybe, Matt, if you could start, just give a little bit more of your background.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for coming out today. I've been in the professional sports industry for 22 years now, 12 with the Blues. Kind of a crazy background, got a degree in journalism, went into PR, marketing, then digital media, innovation and tech, so makes total sense. But I've really enjoyed the journey in the sports industry. I got my start in professional tennis. I worked for the Orlando Magic, so I was on the NBA side for a while before coming to St. Louis. We spent a lot of time in the last 6-7 years working in the startup space, really trying to identify emerging tech that makes sense for our business, and it's been a really fruitful space for us to be a part of.
Bill?
Thanks, Matt. Bill Powell, originally from Kirkwood, Missouri, St. Louis kid. Had to go out east to get a job on Wall Street in order to come all the way back to St. Louis and start working with Art at Stadia Ventures 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that, where I was in charge of direct deal flow. Obviously a finance person, was in a series of fintech and tech startups in Scandinavia, in Stockholm, Sweden. Moved to Denver 20 years ago to take a brief hiatus for a year, or so my wife thought. She's from Stockholm. We've been there 20, and we kind of call it St. Louis West. And that's become a very vibrant startup ecosystem. And so my current fund, Anthropy Partners, we work with companies that are focused on physiological, neurological, and advanced material sciences questions, and that convergence. And the reason that has to do with sports is because a lot of that has to do with human health, the human condition, and elite performance. And our thesis is really around elite performance from elite to everyone. So the Tam Sam summer on sports is a great gateway, and it's fantastic, but what can it do beyond that? So sports ends up being a great proving ground.
Hi, Stephen Tungett, currently the COO of Axioforce. Axioforce is a new sports tech startup. We've got a pretty revolutionary ground reaction force technology that allows for some pretty cool wearable technology in the sports market. I'm kind of an accidental startup guy. Didn't really intend to find myself working in so many startups, but so I have. So prior to working for Axioforce, I was with a startup out of Denver, Colorado called Brewmate. Also was head of operations and finance for a local startup called Normal Brand. And prior to that, worked on a startup in the sports consumer tech market called Earbuds. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Steve, let's start with you right away. So a question for all of you is sports. So what is it about sports that is different from other sectors that if there are entrepreneurs or business people out there, what is it that's different or similar that makes sports so special?
Yeah, great question. I think there's probably more similarities than differences when you're talking about a startup. You know, when you're looking at the finances, the sales plan, the supply chain plan, all those sorts of things, a lot of commonalities. I think what makes sports different, at least the sport companies that I've been a part of, is there's a higher bar seemingly for authenticity. I think that's good and bad, by the way. So good, because if you can prove yourself authentic, you can find a lot of customers that are willing to give you a shot. Bad, because it's not always obvious and easy to prove yourself authentic. You know, one of the things that we had to do at Earbuds that was a totally unique marketing strategy from anything that I've ever been around was we had to really find a way to get grassroots with the runners. You know, if you're in a sport like baseball or football or something like that, like, yeah, you can get a lot of clout and validation from signing a big name athlete. We were in the endurance sport market, and those people could care less about athlete endorsement. It's exclusively what the tribe and the community is into, and if you can be a member of that tribe and community. So we ultimately ended up finding the best way to prove ourselves authentic and validate was to attend marathon events. So, you know, we would put ourselves in front of millions and millions of potential customers on an annual basis just by attending these marathon events that they would go to and kind of ingrain ourselves in that community.
Great. Bill, what about your aspect, your views? I mean, you've invested, participated in other industries other than sports. So what's different about sports?
Yeah, you know, Art, that's well, I guess I'll say I was an institutional LP for about a decade, investing across all forms of venture capital and private equity, pretty much, you know, stage and industry agnostic. And I kind of stumbled into sports about 13, 14 years ago from the health perspective. And then all of a sudden, I started recognizing that there was a lot of emerging tech that would help improve the human condition, but that was coming out of people who were athletes, but also scientists. And oh, well, that's interesting. And then the marketing side of the equation. And I think that's what intrigues me the most about sports from an investment perspective are the people. You know, when I look at investments, I think about three real filters. The first is the people, their domain expertise, how relevant it is. But what trumps that more about the people is their value systems, right? What are their definitions of right and wrong, and do those coincide with what we're trying to do? The second is really what's exponential about their technology. And that's what's been so fascinating about the sports industry the last 15 years or so, is this growth in exponential tech, right? An amalgamation of different things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, computer vision, motion capture, all kinds of things, different sensors like Oura Ring, you know, checking on your sleep, and how you push these things together. And the optionality of that technology, like a company like Stevens at Axioforce, and then the community that it builds. So it draws in people who have domain expertise, are disciplined, and typically have good value systems. And so that's what we kind of see as ingredients in the early to mid stage in sports, both in North America, where we're leading to a certain degree, and particularly in terms of franchise values, but also out of Europe and emerging Asia.
Matt, how about your views? And especially, you know, you've worked not only in sports but also in other entertainment venues. So is there complete crossover between sports and entertainment? Is that very similar, or is it other categories that it's more similar to?
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. I think the biggest thing, I'll take the team side for instance. For decades, things operated relatively routine. If you were working for a sports team, right? You sold tickets when they came to your venue, you sold concessions, you sold retail, you sold sponsorships, and then you had TV rights. Now, especially because of the digital era that we're in, it's opening up a whole lot new level of different opportunities. The data collection we were able to get at a team level to where we can personalize and customize experiences, different verticals that we hadn't thought about before. Esports, for instance, one. Sports betting now becoming legalized in Missouri, another thing that we will be thinking a lot more about, have been thinking about for several years now, waiting for it to happen. But it's enabled us to have better, stronger, deeper conversations with our fan base and find technology that aligns with those initiatives, along with really finding operational efficiencies of how we're doing business on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Hey, before I should have started off by saying I'd love to get a poll from the audience just to see kind of why are you here and what are you interested in learning about. Show of hands, who's interested in entrepreneurship, starting a company in sports? Okay. How about just working in the sports world or maybe partnering with sports companies? Okay. Investing, any investors out there investing in sports? Okay. Okay, so good. So now you got a little view. I wanted to touch on one other general topic other than sports, which is tying us all together, which is this community, the St. Louis community and the St. Louis ecosystem. I know that there was critical, I often tell people that Stadia Ventures was started in St. Louis because it could not have happened anywhere else, and that the support within St. Louis was critical. I'm originally a Philadelphian, so I can say that Philadelphia wouldn't have happened. So what is it about the St. Louis community, whether it's the startups that come here or the investors or this whole startup ecosystem that you think is unique and powerful, Matt?
I think one of the things I didn't realize when I came to St. Louis in 2012 was just how much the people in this city care about this community. We've had these initiatives to be St. Louis first. Also in 2012, our ownership changed over. We have a full St. Louis-based ownership group now for the Blues. We have the longest continuous ownership group in the history of the franchise. And you see that with a lot of the things that we're doing, right? We're leaning into partnerships with St. Louis companies, Enterprise, Anheuser-Busch, Purina, Stiefel. Those are the type of relationships that we've been wanting to build upon. And as we started to get more involved with the startup community, through Stadia Ventures, through Arch Grants, we were getting a lot of introduction to very eager St. Louis companies, some that had direct ties to sports with products that we should be thinking about, others that had not so close ties, but they would solve some problems for us. And so it was important for us to open our doors, take phone calls, take meetings, demonstrate that we're supporting St. Louis. And if it wasn't something that we necessarily would use, we have a lot of connections through corporate partners and other means that we can get them, open up doors that they can reach out and hopefully have some very fruitful conversations with other groups in the community.
Great. Bill, you're a native St. Louisan, but you're gone elsewhere out of the country, back and forth. So what is it about St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned values and value systems earlier, and I think that's a lot about this community. It's pretty, it's welded together, right? That's a nice interwoven fabric and people helping each other. And I think that's really a critical step in entrepreneurship. And it really took me running into you at the Sports and Fitness Industry Association in Chicago. And Art's like, well, you should come down and see I'm like, what's happening? Come on, really, Art? I live in Denver. That place is cool. And he's like, no, get down to St. Louis. Next thing you know, we were bringing in startups from all over the world to St. Louis. And I started thinking a lot about St. Louis's deep history around innovation, because I think people forget this sometimes. There's a great book by Walter Isaacson called The Innovators. If you've never read it, you should read it. And it really touches on the genesis of a lot of technology and this technology corridor in St. Louis. And when I was growing up here, it was really home to the most corporate headquarters in the United States. And so we have this long history of leading edge innovation, both in defense and health and ag tech and all these areas. And it's fascinating to see how St. Louis is rebuilding itself again, and how that community has actually become more and more vibrant over time and attracted external capital all the way into the middle of the country.
Yeah, I'll keep it short because I generally agree with what Bill and Matt both said. I think there's a value system here in the Midwest St. Louis included, that is unique from the rest of the country. You know, and then there's also just like, there's the real things. St. Louis is relatively affordable to live, and it's relatively affordable to have a startup, you know, compared to Denver or LA or San Francisco or something like that. You know, the university system here obviously pours a lot into emerging companies and emerging tech. You know, you get sort of unique to St. Louis startups relative to some startups that I've done outside of St. Louis, is that St. Louis startups generally have a lot of homegrown St. Louis people working for them. The startup that I worked for in Denver was like a who's who of every state in the nation, right? St. Louis is seemingly different in that regard.
Stephen, I'll keep it with you. So I know as a multiple, I don't want to say serial entrepreneur, but multiple entrepreneur, I know one of the reasons I wanted to do it again was I wanted a do-over on some of those lessons that I learned the first time around. It's just like I had another chance to do it again. So you've been through a bunch of different entrepreneurial activities and a bunch of startups. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned, and maybe how are you applying them at Axioforce?
Yeah, great question, and I've done a lot of reflection because I've also made a lot of missteps. So thing number one is I think 90% of making it is having the audacity to continue whenever all logic and reason says that you should quit. You know, perseverance is not easy, and you know, again, coming back to the values, the first time that I talked to Bill about the owners of Axioforce and now my co-founders, you know, one of the things that Bill had to say was they won't quit. Even when most people will quit, they won't quit. You know, something else that was really fantastic for me was I had a really great mentor early on. We joke that I think part of that mentorship was I was just willing to do all the crap jobs that he didn't want to do, but you know, learned a lot that way. As far as, you know, things to focus on, I think if you can find a way to prioritize product, customer service, building the right team, and cash flow, you can go really far with those four things. And again, you're not going to be perfect at it out of the gate. Nobody is, but if you can be intentional about doing as best you can on those four things, you can go a really far way. You know, as far as do-overs go, I think you know, the one regret that I have looking back is not enjoying the process more. It's stressful, and it's really easy to get caught up in, I can't wait till we finish this product. I can't wait till we close this deal. I can't wait till we sell this freaking company. I'm, you know, pulling my hair out, but in reality, you know, you're in a situation that a lot of people would really love to be in. I think if I was, you know, there's one thing I would have enjoyed the process more. Yep.
Bill, you've invested in a bunch of different startups, and some have been successes, some have not been successes. Right. So, what are some of the common threads, if any, that are positive? The reasons why these teams and these companies succeed versus the ones that do not. Anything that you can relate?
Oh gosh, Art, there's so much to unpack there. I'll try to keep it really short. I mean, I guess I've started like 9 companies, and I've invested in several hundred. So, and each of them are unique. I think, you know, it really depends on the stage, but I'm fond of saying it's another overnight success that's 8 to 13 years in the making. So let that sink in, right? It's another overnight success that's 8 to 13 years in the making. You might have a company that's 5 years old and it just implodes, right? So I'll go back to the value systems, the people you surround yourself with. The most important ingredient in any startup is the people, right? Their expertise, but who they are and how they are. No operating agreement in the world can true out how you're going to act, right? You either are good people or they're coming together to solve and work and iterate. I don't want to say solve, iterate on problems, right? This is about strong problem identification. I don't want to hear about a solution. The best companies, they're constantly looking at what are the problems, and they're keen observers, and they're taking in all the inputs, but not overly taking in all the inputs, and they're sorting those out. And that's a really important part of the equation. I think the second thing is what type of capital and expectations, right? I think a lot of people enter startups, particularly after this last period of time, right? Who's familiar with the term weighted average cost of capital? Right, one person. That was 0. Austin could have come up here and said, Bill, here's my name tag. I'm going to make name tags. I'm like, here's $1 million. Like, things were getting funded at a ridiculous level because money didn't cost anything. But I will let you know a little secret. Money always costs something. Always, even in those times. And you're seeing it play out right now. And so the type of capital and the value systems associated with that capital really matter. If you have a history of strong dilutive equity grant funding and some private capital, that can be a great formula. I bet there are a lot of people in this room who think about getting grants. You probably should. It's a cheap way to retain all the ownership in your company and prove out your technology and realize, you know what, maybe it's not there. We create some great IP, we can partner with somebody else. And too many people looking for setting their expectations maybe too high, because business formation is business formation. You're starting a business, and it has to make money. You're a startup by choice, but you're a business by necessity. And I think sometimes people forget that, and they get caught up on either raising money or chasing the next shiny object, and that kind of gets them off direction from what their ultimate goal is. And I guess the last thing is those key advisors, right? There are different people. It's just like on any team, right? There are different people for different seasons and different times. And so there are people who are really good at the pre-seed to the Series A. There are other people who are really good at Series B through Series D. And then there are people who might take you public. By the way, that's an ultimate outlier event, so don't even be thinking about that. If it happens, isn't that wonderful? That took 16 years, right? I was a seed investor in Pinterest. It was a great success. It took 14, what was it? I think we invested early 2009. That was the seed round, so the company was already 4 years old. And we exited in August 2020. I've been involved in other companies that have gone on for 14 years and failed and poured more and more money into it because you believed in it. And then ultimately you're selling out the chattel, as they say, right? So you need to, I guess my biggest lesson learned there is knowing when not to recommit or not to be a part of something.
So Matt, you're responsible for innovation for a major franchise in a major city, but you still work with startups. So, do you have to work with startups? Why do you enjoy working with startups, and what do you see different about working with startups than working with, say, an established technology company?
I think the big thing to know about working with sports teams is we have big presence, but we have very small staffs. So we have to be creative about how we look at tech and we look at new ways of doing things. We work with a lot of well-established companies, right? Ticketmaster is our ticketing provider. We use Shift4 to process payments in our facilities. So we have relationships with huge companies. But sometimes it's great to find opportunities to almost use startups as a little bit of an R&D arm. We don't have internal staffs that are just focused on let's come up with ideas and let's build tech. We don't develop in-house. We don't have engineers. So finding opportunities for us to try things out, and it's got to be a mutual partnership, right? We got to be able to build a case study for them. When it works for us, we got to be ready to answer calls, to reach out to other teams to say, hey, check this out. This was a great thing for us. All while making sure that we are getting into partnerships that are going to give us the small sample size that we're going to need to make a solid understanding if it's going to be something that we should invest in further. So that's the biggest thing for us is trying things out. Usually with us, it's a crawl, walk, run type process, and we want to align with companies that kind of want to go at that same pace to make sure we're mutually going down the right path.
Can you give an example of a startup that you've worked with or you're working with that is working out, and maybe kind of how that whole process went?
Yeah, I'll give you a local company we've had a relationship with for a number of years. There's a company called TuneSpeak. TuneSpeak was built by a couple of musicians, Tom and Rick Pernikoff. They traveled the world performing for a number of years, decided they wanted to solve something in the music industry, and built this platform that essentially artists, as they were going on a 30-city tour, they could do an enter to win in all 30 of those cities, and city by city start to identify who that audience is. And they had a tremendous amount of success. You could probably right now think of your favorite artist, and more than likely they have run a contest on TuneSpeak's platform. So we started conversations with them of like, okay, how do we get this to work in sports? Like, you know, our fan base is mostly St. Louis, and we play in the same location, you know, for our home games. So they were very open to trying things out. They saw sports as an opportunity, and we started these small sample sizes of let's do this enter to win. When we were in the Winter Classic for the first time in 2017, we had an opt-in for tickets going through their platform. All the while sort of analyzing this to see, okay, this has something, this has some substance, we can build upon this. So fast forward to 2019, we were fortunate enough to win the Stanley Cup. At the same time that was going on, behind the scenes, we were building our platform with them that we call Lunatics. And so about 5 months after we won the Cup, we launched Lunatics. Perfect time to have a very, very engaged fan base say, yes, we will do anything you ask of us right now because we love what you've done for this city and for my favorite team. So through that process, we built a platform where you could go a single sign-on for polls, surveys, quizzes, game day activities. We've onboarded 150,000 unique fans. We've done 1.7 million activities over the course of that time. It's become the single sign-on for our mobile app. It's a sign-on for our Kids Club program, our bar program. We use metrics and data that we've gotten for this that touch about every facet of our business. And it started from a very simple conversation of how can we take something that has had success in the music industry and find an application for it in sports. And about 2 weeks ago, we announced our most recent engagement with them. They spun off a new company called Daisies, and Daisies creates AI-powered games on any topic you could possibly think of. So they have a St. Louis Blues topic that they've built for us. There are 6 games that get updated every day. Think Wordle, think Connections, those types of games that you want to go back and play day after day. That's something we could not do in-house, right? We could not have a team spend time and do it 365 days of the year. But because they leaned into AI with a little bit of human moderation, we were able to create something that creates great content in our mobile app, opens up sponsorship opportunities, allows us to learn more about our fan base, and gives us a really great product.
So one last continuation follow-up question on that for you, Matt. So then, how do these startups first get in contact with you? I mean, if there's a company out in the audience right now that wants to get in touch with the Blues, how do they go about doing that?
We get people reaching out that have St. Louis ties. We have ties come in from corporate partners, league relationships, and it's great. We get a lot of introductions to companies to say, like, you know, hey, take a look at this, and sometimes it piques our interest right away. We're like, okay, there's something here. We should at least have a conversation. I think the great thing about what we do is that we provide pretty straightforward, candid feedback. If there's not a fit for us, it might just not be a fit today, right? There might be steps along the way that we have to get to a point where we can use it, and those types of conversations happen all the time. It's not you, it's me. It's literally me, because for whatever reason we're not set up to have success and be able to take part of this. But there's been a lot of relationships like that we've continued over years just by having a very simple conversation, receiving a deck, seeing a video of a pitch that's been done, going through accelerator programs and different things like that have been really important touch points for us to be a part of to make sure we're seeing companies that are out there and identifying opportunities for ourselves.
So you're open to ideas. So you're more
anytime. Doors open.
Always looking for a good idea. Excellent. Bill, so let's talk about Anthropy. So you're investing in human potential companies. So any particular ones that you're excited about, or more excited that you can tell the audience about?
Well, I mean, one of them sitting right next
Other
to me.
than, of
so-
course, other than Axioforce,
I
of course.
just, that was a very cold winter day in early February in Kansas when I first went to their lab. Yeah, I was actually thinking a lot about, before I jump into it, on what Matt was saying. And I think there's two other things I would just add to the previous question, which are that, I guess, in some, if you're going to fail fast, right? That's what I was really trying to tell you in a long-winded way. And then the other side is just because someone says okay, so what? Keep updating them. Because I think that's what I heard Matt saying is like, we want to watch your progress. And they mean it. Because sometimes organizations aren't ready, right? We had one startup that went through Stadia, Crowd IQ, way ahead in terms of AI, venue tech. And I remember after one call with 2 franchises, he said, oh, they finally hired data scientists. Data scientist is a new job that's come into Major League Sports. This was 4 years ago. And you didn't have the people in the room to even understand the tech yet, right? So sometimes you have to be early to be on time. Sometimes you're just too early, and that's part of that. The companies, a lot of the companies we look at, they have to hit all those filters, but they have to really be helping to improve the human condition. And so a lot of the things I've already mentioned, community, how people come together around solutions, are really important. I don't want to speak about Axioforce so much as, because I'll let Stephen do that, but I think about a company out of Denmark that we found that whose first market was really Colorado and Texas. And somebody called us and said, hey, we're making a do-it-yourself lower leg amputee kit. A leg costs $25,000 to $35,000, but ours is 90% cheaper. And you can get it in 5 to 9 business days instead of 6 months in the US. Like, oh my gosh, really? And they showed up, they opened up a box of legs, people put on legs, they started running around and building community. That company has it's just taken off, right? And it had all those elements of community, the consumer, putting power back into people who were, kind of in a situation where they relied on a prosthetist and a doctor, and they're like, hey, I just lost 30 pounds, I need a new leg. Oh, sorry, you have to wait 5 months. They were really looking at problems, right? And iterating and collaborating on those problems. And they were former Paralympian triathletes and engineers. There you go, right? So I get excited about solutions like that. I get really excited about brain-computer interface solutions, the neurological side of the equation, some of the companies we've seen on that side. I also get excited by a lot of the companies that I see in the new venue tech that Matt was mentioning. And it's interesting because you get this crossover between the home and the venue and this ease of movement. I think earlier you said frictionless, right? So a frictionless environment where you're just kind of there so that you can be more present. And I think that's one of the things that we look for in solutions, Art, in general, is that particularly as AI has become more prominent, Art, we've been investing in machine learning and AI together for a decade. It was only the last 24 months everyone really started talking about some of that. And in the rise of AI, emotional quotient and being present is more important than ever. So we look for those elements.
Stephen, I'm going to ask you a little bit about some go-to-market strategy. You've had companies. Axioforce right now is primarily B2B in their business. You've had companies like Earbuds that are primarily B2C. When we talk about scaling companies, so many times we work with startups. They have a great idea, they know how to sell 1 or 2, but then the scaling process is the thing that's the repeatable scaling process for growth is really the challenge. And it's certainly different B2B versus B2C. So can you talk a little bit about some of the differences and the challenges you have between those two?
Yeah, for sure. So Earbuds was 2010 to 2014. So that was even a little before the e-com boom, believe it or not. I think at Earbuds, maybe like 10% of our annual sales were from e-com, which is totally different now. Now, if you're talking,
is everybody familiar with what Earbuds was? Earbuds had the in-ear earpieces for runners, hugely successful.
Yeah.
Ended up selling out to Harman Kardon.
Yeah, and now Harman is sold to Samsung, and so there's former Earbuds employees that are now employees of Samsung, which is insane to me. But yeah, it's certainly a challenge that you need to understand how to attack, and it seemingly is ever evolving. So, Gen 1 e-com was like when you could do very targeted marketing campaigns and all that sort of stuff on Facebook and Instagram and everywhere else. And now that's completely changed. So it's an ever evolving space for sure. And having sales and marketing subject matter experts that know exactly what they're doing is really critical, because it can get really expensive really quick if you don't. Axioforce is more on the B2B side of things. So we're selling to sports teams, professional, and college. I'll be chasing Matt around after this and trying to sell him some stuff. We sell to strength and conditioning coaches. We sell to people that are doing sport-specific biomechanics, so golf swing analysis, baseball pitching analysis, tennis swing analysis. And with that, you're getting a much more educated buyer, right? So there's a lot of times where we're talking to the customer and they know just as much about our product as we do, or how it should work, for instance, right? So you're not for us, at least on the sports tech side of things, you're not convincing people to buy a lifestyle brand or something like that. It's a very clear value proposition that you have to be able to convey to the customer. So yeah, it's certainly different. Our trajectory is that we hope to have a shoe insole that does exactly what our 3-axis force plates do now, which will be a game changer, truly for the industry. So yeah, we're already thinking about what's the right strategy to go there. Do we need to find a distribution partner, someone who's already got an authentic brand that we can co-develop this with? The supply chain strategy for that will be completely different than anything that we're doing on the force plate side of things. So yeah, it's complicated. It's unique, seemingly, in a lot of ways. There's a lot of similarities, but going back to what I was saying earlier, about having a mentor. There's a lot of value in having someone who has seen the movie before, and knows where to put focus and what is just noise that you can ignore. And then the last thing I'll say about this is, the more you can understand about your customer as fast as possible cannot be overestimated. And especially early on, don't be shy or afraid to trade profits for knowledge and validation. If you can find partnerships that they don't look great on the books, you're not going to make a ton of money, but what you're going to gain in knowledge, you can't put a price on. Some of the most fruitful things that I've had come out of a relationship started out that way.
It's interesting. I'll add to that. So, experience-wise, so for those of you that have B2C, it's more consumer products. So the sales cycle nowadays is more instantaneous. You can run a program and learn about pricing or terms, whatever, instantaneously almost on a new product. Your B2B sales cycle is quite different depending on who you're going to call on. If you're going to call on universities, for example, that many of our companies call on, there's going to be a certain season that you got to hit it. And if you don't hit it in those 2 months, you got to wait another 12 to come around, and the budget's gone. So you really need to understand who you're selling to and how they buy, how they spend their money as you enter that. Bill, let's talk about something near and dear to your heart: pitch days. Pitch days. So you sit through you see a lot of pitch decks, you see a lot of pitches in person. I think some of the people in the audience here are probably getting ready to maybe pitch you or to pitch in a competition. What are some of the things that are immediate green lights or red lights? Let's start with the red lights. What's a red light on a pitch day for you?
Oh gosh, now you put me on the spot, and I have to pitch, Art.
Yes.
Let's see. I turnoffs. I mean, when I'm in the middle of a conversation with somebody on the side, you might not realize it, but somebody I don't get to see very often, and it's like been like a year, and you just interrupt and you want to, right? I mean, like, I think just being respectful and walking up to people, because there's always time, right? Particularly after events and things, people come back around, and I always stick around. I make a point of that. I think I heard 30 pitches last night at the pitch event in Denver at the University of Denver. I've heard at least 4 earlier today. I think you pitched me on the way over here.
And we had lunch.
And we had lunch, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's really a turnoff, and I think there's positive persistence. I think there's negative persistence. You know, when I receive a deck, I probably spend about 30 seconds on that deck. It might have taken you 30 hours to build it. So you've really got it, and think about all these devices, right? I mean, like, the power of attention, it's there. So you've got it, make it matter. And I think there's an assumption that I'm going to read a 40-page deck. I'm a speed reader, but I'm going to get your message in 4 slides, and I will know. And it's partially pattern recognition and partially history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? And because that's my job. My job is to, like, look at some of these things and then just see what the outlier is. And so that's when I get excited, when I see people really embracing all these AI tools that can help anybody enhance their message in a really quick way. And so there's so many out there. And then I guess another one is when, I guess it's a turnoff, when people are pitching me. I get a lot of pitches via LinkedIn, right? And I just let it all fly. And everyone's expecting me to give them my email. And there's so many, even my assistant, she just writes Bill at, right? And then people will respond, Bill at what? And I'm like, well, if you can't figure that out, it's a URL at anthropypartners.com, right? So just kind of like take the easy, and then trial and error, right? B Powell or Bill.Powell or whatever. But that's problem solving, and so that's part of pitching, that tight messaging.
Oh, Matt, you see your share of pitches as well. You get pitched either in competitions or demo days or online. So what's a turnoff for you? What's a red light warning sign for you about a pitch?
I think oftentimes, a founder going into that conversation is looking at it and they're like, I got 30 minutes to sell this thing. And they miss opportunities of taking the time to learn our pain points, learn our business, have a little bit of conversation to begin with, and then be able to adjust what you're going to say the last 15, 20 minutes to really pique our interest, to see, like, we look at it as, I don't want a vendor, I want a partner. I want a partner that is going to be there for me. I want a partner that I can be there for them. I want us to sit down after we've done an engagement and go through it, what worked, what didn't work, and then start to build what we're going to do next. And so asking questions, listening to those responses that you get, and then sort of formulating along the way how you're going to pitch this that is specific to how the St. Louis Blues operate versus the Cardinals versus City versus wherever you might be, because city by city, team by team, league by league, yes, there are a ton of commonalities of how we do business, but there are very distinct pain points that we're trying to address that are priorities for us, that you want to spend a few minutes to make sure you can kind of pinpoint what those are.
Excellent. And I know Matt won't toot his own horn, but I will. So if you have any things to talk about in terms of a team or a league, get Matt's input. He is very well respected within the league office. Follows a lot of directions of Matt, and is certainly within the greater professional sports. His opinion, I value his opinion very much out of all the major sports. Hey, we have 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we have time for questions from the audience. So do you want to pass the mic around? Or?
Please come stand over here.
Oh, yeah.
Use the mic, if that works.
Okay, yeah, if you come on up, ask your.
And they'll use that mic and pass it back.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot for being here. You mentioned that Bill, you mentioned you like to see AI being used to make pitches better, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you gentlemen encounter the term AI when you're being pitched all the time. I would love to hear from you a recent example, whether it's maybe imagined or maybe actual encounter of someone who said, I'm using AI to X, and you were like, that was dumb. Or I'm using AI to Y, and you're like, that sounds amazing. Because AI is this big promised thing that's going to solve everything, and it's this magical black box. And how do you interpret that as an investor and someone who's assessing a company?
That's a great question. As a finance person, I think of AI, ML, and this KYC, AML, know your client, anti-money laundering. And there was a time when everyone would just say AI, ML, like when Art and I were looking at a lot of motion capture stuff already a decade ago. And if you were in the industry, you knew, because you were dealing with people who knew what the distinction was between machine learning and emerging artificial intelligence, let's call it that, right? And what these distinct layers are and differences. And that you can kind of suss that out very quickly. And that comes down to a lot of domain expertise. Last night, it was all freshmen. And I think of the, whatever it was, 25 teams, there was one where they were athletes and they were engineers. And they were speaking about machine learning at length, and I was like, okay, so they actually know what they're doing here. And so I heard, you see a lot of that. I mean, I don't hear a lot of pitches that have where people don't know that, because you sort that out early on, right? Those are the people who are negatively persistent and who aren't thinking that it could be 8 to 13 years before an exit, and you're trying to assess in 30 seconds whether or not this is somebody you're willing to be in the trenches with for 8 to 13 years, because you could have dialed that in. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of misuses. One of the companies I work with has an AI intelligence layer that sits on top of all the algorithms coming off of all the IoT. It's like over 10 billion, whatever, 10.3 or 10 point, it's expanding all the time, pieces of IoT in the world. You're like, oh my gosh, a lot of those signals are really wrong. The R squared is like 70, right, 0.77 versus like a 0.96. You could talk a lot about R squareds on your stuff, and that matters, right? So like, I think that's the stuff that I look for, is like, is someone going to talk to me about p-values or t-stats, or what do they know their stuff, or are they not? And it kind of becomes its own self-regulating gating mechanism. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think too, it's what are you telling me? And not that I'm not an investor, I'm not getting pitches like Bill is, but we have a healthcare component to our product, and we received an NIH grant. We had to go to this like business building thing for all these NIH companies. I was the dumbest person at that thing by a long shot, but almost every product there was talking about some sort of AI component, and you could tell who was going to be successful, because it's with where it's at right now, the big advantage is really the amount of data that's able to be processed, right? So, for instance, we have a calibration with our product. The legacy load cells that we compete against, people will brag to you that they do a 90-point calibration on their load cells. We do a 2 million point calibration because we run it through a neural net. There's a machine learning component, all those sorts of things. So I think it depends on how you're applying it and what you're telling me it's going to be used, and how you're going to use it as a tool, right?
Great. Next question.
My name's Calvin Dantley. I'm an instructional designer, and I build online courses for small companies and big companies. And my question is about the intersection between sports technology and education technology. Are there trends that you're seeing now or anticipate in the future that would be important to pay attention to?
Yeah, I'll just go really quick. Yes, definitely. So with with our product, for instance, you can quantify something that previously has not been able to be quantified. That's the core of our product. And with that, it opens the door to tons of educational opportunities in mostly biomechanics education, but yeah, certainly others as well.
Just in general, education as it relates to sports, I think the big feeder for us on the sports team side has been sport management programs that have very traditionally focused on marketing, sponsorship, and ticket sales. And like we've discussed, there's so many different ways we're looking at the business now. Like I've had a lot of conversations with different universities to hopefully see a little bit more innovation coming into those programs where we can focus more on sports tech, because it's drastically driving business and how we are looking at prospective employees that we want to bring in from recruitment. Business intelligence and data analytics type roles, digital media backgrounds, very key into making sure we have people with the right skill sets to apply to positions how they operate now versus how they've traditionally been in the sports industry.
As we pass this.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing. I think that's a great comment, because I think of them as tools in your toolkit, right? I mentioned some of the light lift on AI. Okay, go out and know all the tools. I don't know. You tell me. I'm 54. If I'm beating you on knowing which tools to use and which not to, you're an undergrad or grad student, there's an issue here, right? You should really be embracing all these things, and then that's what you're kind of bringing to the workplace. And that's actually that's to that point about data scientists and being in league offices and things like that now. I mean, this is a completely different era. Everything's so connected, right? So like, those skills are table stakes, at least.
Great. One more. While we pass this over to the next question, I'll add my 2 cents there. So one other thing you need to look at is trends. And I think with education crosses over is that in sports, data is coming in, and this is what we did at Rapsodo. Data creates new definitions of performance as you can measure it. When you have new definitions of performance, then you have new ways of teaching that performance and new ways of measuring and assessing that performance. That brings up opportunities. So.
Hi, my name's David Moss. I'm a student entrepreneur in the Spark program with the Parkway School District. And my question was for you, Mr. Gardner, about the amendment 2 that passed sports betting. I'm really curious, what will that specifically change in terms of what people are allowed to do and in terms of how it'll affect sports teams?
Yeah, thank you. I think as we've looked at the landscape of sports betting for many, many years now, I mean, going back probably 5 years, we've been kind of having discussions and preparing of what that would look like if it got legalized in Missouri. And now that it will become legalized, we're trying to understand, based on the learnings of other states for many years now that have been legalized, what the revenue impact is going to be on our business. The amount of money that we will be bringing to the table, adding to what we've been able to do, has changed based on learnings of some of those early states of New Jersey's and Tennessee's and others that became legalized, and you had the sports book making deals with teams in those markets. And so we have to kind of look at a number of things. The footprint we have at our building is a little bit different than, say, Busch Stadium that has Ballpark Village, that has a lot more accessible place for a regular sports book to come into play. So there's a lot of conversations about how we will operate, where will we operate in our building, how we have to make adjustments. Obviously there'll be a load of advertising like you're seeing everywhere. There'll be a lot more coming soon in venue and out of venue. But we have had the time to kind of see best practices that have taken place in other states. All that to say, there'll be a lot of discussions in 2025. Something that will probably start to take shape a year from now or so, based on some of the other states that have become legalized and their timelines and stuff. But we're excited about the opportunities and see where this goes, and hopefully increasing revenue for the state like it has in many places. And now we're not having to compete with our residents going out of state to sports bet.
Do we have time for one more question? Are we okay? A few more, sure.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing today. Usually when we have these conversations about sports, we're all thinking traditional sports, hockey, baseball, things where you have the physical items. And I'd like to ask about esports. Earlier we said, hey, to be on time you have to be early, and sometimes you're too early. And so I'm wondering if any of you have any insights into that, because some people say like esports is dead and it's dying, but then you have things happen like the Olympics opening up a committee and saying, hey, we're gonna do esports now. So kind of where do you see that falling into the landscape of sports tech in general?
I'll give a super quick answer, and I'll let Matt take the rest because I think that's probably more appropriate. What's the value of the gaming market globally? About $185 billion. Where's that headed by 2030? About 225 or whatever the number is. Esports is only, maybe at the best estimate, $3 billion. It's just like a drop. It doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that the TAM, SAM, and the sum, the total addressable, serviceable, obtainable, and addressable, are smaller, right? So they have a place in community, but these are not massive markets. There's one thing there, though, that doesn't get picked up in those numbers, and that's this bridge between community of gaming and esports. These are very different things. I have other opinions, but I'll let Matt go because he's got the franchise there.
I think the biggest thing for us is using it as a tool to continue to cultivate a relationship with a younger audience, right? Some are getting introduced to your sport for the very first time through video games, more than they're watching full games, right? They're playing video games with their friends. They're watching highlights on social media. So having a presence there is important, but I also think you got to understand where you fit into the full dynamic of sports gaming titles. You know, the NHL title is small in comparison to FIFA and Madden and NBA 2K. The NBA has had success with their 2K league because of the popularity of that game. That would not necessarily translate at the NHL level. But timing is key, trying things out are key. We were in a very fortunate position in April of 2020. You all remember what started in March of 2020 to spin up a NHL tournament online. And we were able to fill a 512 player bracket for Xbox and another one on PlayStation, and had a lot of success. Why? Because everybody was home, and what else are you going to do besides, you know, play video games? But the next year, we got half that number. And the following year, we got about half that number. So timing was great on that, but it kind of demonstrated to us that we weren't going to have success on an ongoing basis, but we continue to find ways of evaluating how we're going to use titles. One thing that we do when the new NHL game comes out is we do side-by-side comparisons between the likeness of the player in NHL and in real life. And it's funny because sometimes it looks nothing like them, and we get our players' reactions and they laugh in the locker room. It makes for great content. So we're pulling in something that has strong ties in pop culture and finding a way to elevate it into our brand, even though at the moment we might not be activating with tournaments or league type play.
We'll keep taking questions till we get kicked out. That's
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm a high school student. I've got a question for Mr. Gardner real quick. You've worked in two completely different markets, really, being St. Louis and Orlando, and St. Louis is kind of diehard about their sports teams, and Orlando is kind of an older population. How do you really focus in and kind of hone in on that market's prospectability, basically? Like, how do you shift your attention one way or another?
Yeah, thank you. I grew up a Midwest kid, so I grew up outside of Kansas City. Now I've been in St. Louis for 12 years, so the majority of my life has been in the Midwest. Midwest people rock when it comes to being sports fans. I just total die-hard committed fans. You know, living in Orlando when I did, and even Jacksonville before that, so seeing Jaguars, Magic, it is a different dynamic, and you're also getting people, especially Orlando, you're gearing into the tourism industry, right? You're getting people that are coming to Orlando, destination vacations, they're going to the parks, may also kind of be coming to a game, and so you sort of have to think about your audience, right? What your focus is going to be. You can't hit every audience with every message, and so you sort of have to kind of figure out what your core focus is going to be. Like I mentioned, how are you going to cultivate that relationship? What does it look like? How do you keep those diehard fans committed? But constantly building that over time. Here in St. Louis, we take a lot of pride in our youth hockey program. Why do we do that? Because we want to build those relationships to be lifelong fans. Somebody getting on the ice the very first time, 4 to 5 years old, that then becomes a member of our kids program, that maybe gets into a gaming type of engagement with us, that as they become college students, gets in student nights, right? They graduate, they have a little bit of income, they start buying single game tickets, and all of a sudden you're building into a partial plan and hopefully a season ticket holder. And so those types of lifelong relationships are important for us. It's important wherever you go. It's just sort of defining what is most relevant to you and your business and your market.
Hello. So I'm an instructor for a business and entrepreneurship program for high school students. I know we have a lot of high school students in here today, thanks to Matt and the team for allowing them to come. But my question for you all is, in a really competitive landscape like sports, anything related to tech and sports business, I have a ton of students every year who come in and say that that's what they want to do. What are some ways that you have seen, either from teams that you've worked with in industry or from startups, what are some ways that they can kind of differentiate themselves, and what are some specific skills that they can focus on getting really great at while they're building that skill set and getting ready to potentially either start their own companies or get into the industry?
Yeah, great question. I don't know that my answer is sports specific, but if you're interested in getting into a startup, I think you should be eager at the opportunity to work incredibly hard in any startup, and borderline miserable maybe for a little bit. You know, the other thing that I always appreciate, especially hiring young folks, is an understanding of the numbers, a good quantitative understanding of how, you know, things move through the business, and a willingness to do kind of any job that needs to be done. Yeah, I think if I can see that you're willing to work hard and you have a general understanding of the numbers, I think my expectation is then that you're ready to be molded into kind of whatever the business needs.
If being wrong most of the time you view it as an opportunity to learn, then you're probably going to do great, because it's a very humbling experience, and I think the key to getting through it, or the people who are most successful at it, tend to be more open-minded, strong observers, and doers, where they incorporate new knowledge all the time, and their mantra is lifelong learning, right? That's why I do what I do. I mean, I don't know most things about most of the companies I work with until I have to learn, right? And so that's the best part about the pitches, is it's an opportunity for me to learn more and to see more, and I think that's a big part of being in a startup. And I think there's an awful lot of opportunity to be a utility infielder, as Steven said. So it's okay to be 90% at a lot of things, because that might be better than someone else's 1% at one thing, or 100% at one thing.
I'll just add that it's never too early to get out there and start getting experience, and there's no role out there that is too small for you to be involved with. One of the examples that I give is when I was in college, I got a job with the Kansas City Chiefs. Game days in a PR role, I worked in the press box, I handed out stats. I went back to the PR office and looked up things, and that was my role. I worked that job because it was just a game day role. I worked that job a total of 13 days. But having that on my resume opened up so many doors. So get out there, get involved, volunteer for a 5K, volunteer for in your school's athletic department, whatever you can do to get started. As Bill mentioned, like, you know, having seconds sometimes to review a pitch deck. Sometimes resumes are reviewed extremely quick. It's a quick scan and yes pile or no pile, and so you want to be in that yes pile. You want to demonstrate that you've put in the time, you've put in the effort to demonstrate that you want to work in sports, because it is a very competitive landscape.
Cool. I'll add there that you're selling yourself, right? All these times, whether it's on the phone or whether you're selling yourselves, just like we talked about earlier on the sales, is most of sales is knowing your customer, not about what you want. It's your customer. So if you come to want to work for Stadia Ventures or Rapsodo or the Blues, you better know something about what we do. Go to the website, do some research, figure out who our customers are. It's unbelievable how much that will set you apart from the people that say, yeah, I want to work in sports, and then they don't know what you actually do, don't know what we actually do. So do some homework ahead of time.
Hey, how y'all doing? So my name is Terrell Davis. I have a creative agency, just launched a couple of weeks ago, but portion of my company, it's founded on technology, also trying to incorporate STEAM into ideas coming out of the youth, coming out of the community. So I know a couple of tax credits just passed. Y'all mentioned them in terms of sports betting. Is any of that money trickling down in terms of school education, sports technology, being able to integrate some of the things that people care about now in this generation, being able to implement some of those ideas, develop some of those ideas from their perspective? Is there any of those monies trickling down for science and sports tech?
I'm not super aware of anything in this. I don't know if either one of you guys are.
Yeah, I don't. Are you referencing here in Missouri?
So just the example project. I have a guy that's working on a robotics program where picks up ball on a robot. Working with youth and little leagues to develop that project, test it. So just science, technology, math. Do you all see that in the sports? I mean, being able to develop something that in the sports arena. I know it's tested somehow.
I can't speak to the state of Missouri, but I mean, for sure, there are all kinds of innovation grants. In Colorado, for example, our governor is one of the founders of Techstars, so we have a lot of really interesting programs, but every state's different. I know that's an unsatisfying answer, but I don't know enough about Missouri's tax credits to be able to speak articulately to that.
Same.
Matt, question. I don't need that. How do you balance your portfolio of biz investments for operational efficiency and on-ice performance, right? Winning championships brings more eyeballs, brings more fans. So when you look at an investment per se or a partnership, how do you balance the operations side of things as well as player enhancement, player recovery for improvement of the enterprise value of the Blues? Use the Dodgers, for example. They went analytics, they won the World Series, now they have more eyeballs, more capital, etc. How does the Blues, or per se organizations, balance the operational efficiencies and performance efficiencies to bridge the gap?
Yeah, my world is kind of simple on that topic because I'm solely focused on business operations. Our hockey operations sort of operate separately. So when it comes to tech that we're going to invest in, startups that we're going to look at, I'm more or less a cog to introduce them, and then that kind of happens on the hockey side. So my role is just solely on business.
Is that it? Okay, that's enough. Thank you very much. So have a round of applause for our panelists.